Welcome to Screen Quest, a podcast where a fellowship of film lovers and armchair movie experts plays film roulette. I'm one of your hosts, Chris Waterman, joined by my fellow party members, May Finch.
Hello, hello.
And Will Rotondi.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome to the podcast. On today's episode, we will be talking about 1989's Christmas Vacation. We'll also be drawing a side quest as usual. We have another round of Pitch Storm, which we haven't played in a while. But first, we wanted to celebrate the anniversary of Return of the King, which was released this day in 2003. So happy birthday to Return of the King. As kind of a little sneak peek into our personal lives, May and I are currently working through the trilogy with a group of our friends in person. And I cannot wait to get to this one because it's long, but it is such a great payoff.
Yeah, I haven't seen most of the Lord of the Rings movies since I was a kid, up until this recent rewatch we're doing with our friends. And I'm realizing that the Fellowship is the only one I remember clearly. The rest of it is just a bunch of battle scenes I think I might have gotten bored during when I was a kid. So I'm excited to watch this as an adult and actually figure out what's going on.
There's definitely a sliding scale that goes from quaint to epic as you get a little further, into the trilogy. So I'm not surprised that battles are where your memory immediately goes. I think that's what stands out probably in both of those films, because both the battles are quite long. But yeah, I don't know, I have such a fond memory. Even the unextended version of Return of the King, I saw at midnight the night it came out, back when you couldn't reserve a seat. You had to get to the theater and stand in line hours before the movie started, so you weren't stuck in the front row. And I want to say they put it on at least 4 or 5 screens simultaneously that night, so that they could accommodate the maximum amount of people. And I think unextended, or even the unextended version is 3 hours and 40 minutes or something. So it was nearly sunrise basically by the time we got out of the movies and got done talking. And it was a school night, and I remember being very tired, and you could spot all the little nerds who had gone to see it at school the next morning, because everyone was very bleary-eyed, and it was worth every second. It was such a great crowd movie because it's the end, right? So there's just payoff after payoff. I remember the cheers. I won't say at which sections because I don't want to tailor your yet to be had experience with it, but I have very fond memories of this as a theatrical experience because it was just so special. Did you go see it in theaters, Will?
I did. I actually got to see it in the theater when I went to visit my friends in Germany. I used to live in Germany for about 4 years back when I was in middle into high school, because my dad was in the army. And after that, after we come back stateside, I'd go back at Christmas to go see some folks. And I got the pleasure of seeing it in the theater in Germany. It was an English screening, and it was really nice that they allowed us an intermission so that everybody could go to the bathroom halfway through, because I don't know if I would have been able to have made it through the epic battle at the end the way that it was. So that was actually pretty awesome. And it was sort of, at that time, the theater that we were in was kind of like stadium seating is now. I mean, back then it wasn't a thing in the US, but it's sort of like that today. And so that was really cool too. I mean, big, almost IMAX size screen. So yeah, it was awesome.
Very cool.
Yeah.
When you saw this, May, were you in the theaters, or was this something you watched home video?
Oh, this was definitely at home, which is also part of why I don't remember it very well, because I'm pretty sure I got bored during the battle scenes and just went to go play with a toy or something.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to the 4 hour and 10 minute iteration that we're going to be watching for our watch party. We will certainly build in an intermission or two, probably for this film. And yeah, we'll maybe report back like once we're done with our viewing, because I would like to get your impressions on the podcast as well as, of course, in person. It'd be fun to hear you report back on what you make of these things, 20-ish years since they've been made. So. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, side quest time. Let's give these the old shuffle-roo and see what we get. It is a Deus Ex Machina. So let me pull up my description for this, since it may have been a little bit since we've had one of these. The description is as follows. Talk about a moment in a film where you could no longer suspend disbelief for the sake of the plot, character, etc.
I mean, I have one, but it's a show, not a movie.
It's okay. I think we're still in arguably like the golden age of like TV streaming, although some people would agree we're past that. But there's still quality stuff. So I would say go for it. We'll
okay. So first of all, I love Arcane. All right. The Netflix League of Legends animated show. For the art, if nothing else. Like, oh my God, it's beautifully animated. I think it has really good character design, compelling story. Maybe this is just because I haven't played the game that it's like based off of, but I have a real problem with the world building, because there's this conflict between like the topsiders and the people that live in the kind of like the grimy underworld, right? Mm-hmm. That's what most of the other like smaller interpersonal conflicts are based off of. But it's like clearly in a situation like that, the topsiders are getting something from that underworld, like financially or economically, right? That's never discussed in the show, and like that would be their main bargaining chip. Also, like would be like strikes and collective action and that kind of thing. And there's just nothing with that. It's all this like kind of like acts of stochastic terrorism between the two groups, and it's like, what if the topsiders truly aren't relying on like the underground city for anything, then why even like bother with them? And that just consistently bothered me through all the things. It's a small detail, but I think it bothered me more because I also do writing and world building, and I was like, hold up a second.
Yeah. That's not an unfair point. I don't have an answer for you, but who would know is our mutual friend Bree.
Yeah.
Who is like an expert at League of Legends. So I'm sure if we asked Bree, she would be happy to enlighten us, and maybe that could lighten the load off your shoulders, or remove that suspension of disbelief a little bit. Hopefully they address it more in the sequel.
It's otherwise such a great show, but anytime they're talking about that central conflict between the topsiders and the underworld, I'm like, I can't care about this because you're ignoring like the most basic bargaining chip you have, which is financial.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that there's certain points here and there where it's just, for me, I guess I would nitpick at it. Like when you mention Arcane, the first thing that came to my mind is how when somebody always has like a really powerful weapon and they like beat the crap out of somebody else like instantly, like insta kill, and then 2 seconds later your protagonist gets like the crap kicked out of him, but there's not the same sort of like attack speed that, because what was it when the first 3 episode little segment where, and I'm totally going to forget everybody's name, so I'm not even going to try. But like in the first 3 episodes segment where you've got some of the bad guy henchmen or like the folks from the Undercity that get like infected with that, that serum, and they become like big hulking, attack guys, and they beat the crap out of like some guards in like a second and they're dead. But then when the main character who's trying to find, it's before she and her sister get separated. So when she's trying to like duke it out with them, then suddenly they're slower or they can't do as much damage to her, and like they try to choke her. And I'm thinking that, to me, I mean, I get it. Maybe he got tired, but I don't know. It's one of those like tropes I feel like happens a lot in action movies where like the bad guy has like a superpower or has some sort of super strength that just like diminishes very quickly. And so I don't know, that's where I kind of get nitpicky about. But again, there could be reason for it. I would agree with you. I think that it is valid as just a basic plot point to understand like the dynamic of why this has become this way. It's sort of like, well, yeah, I mean, it would be good to know. I agree with you on what you find to be a plot hole.
Yeah,
It's because of her armor. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say the same thing. It's plot armor. What you're
Yeah,
talking about.
that's a joke I was gonna make. She's got a very common but powerful armor that's called plot armor. I'm glad. Great minds, right? Nitpicks aside, I do think the show does a pretty remarkable job for like somebody like me who knows next to nothing about that video game that has a lot of lore, like more or less like getting you caught up. I do hope they explore more of that relationship in the subsequent seasons, because I'm interested in stuff like that. I know it's a hard line to walk or balance of, we want to pull casual people in, but also make our hardcore fans happy, and you don't want to like over explain too much too soon. So I get that, but I'm 100% with you, May. I think I could use a little bit more context for where the actual conflict lays, or like where's the, like, I don't know, like where, like as you said, what is it that the lower city people have that the upper city people need? So like, what are they actually fighting about other than just class differences, which is fine. I mean, that's reason enough to fight, I suppose. But
yeah, but like, I want to know the basis of that class difference, and also how do the topsiders have all their wealth? Like, that's got to come from somewhere. Whether it's like stolen or shitty labor practices, like where's the money coming from? Follow the
they've
money.
done more side quests. That's what it is. The lower city people are people that skip the side quests. That's what it is. Well, very cool. Thanks for sharing, May. I love having the occasional TV stuff in there, because I think especially good television has become an excellent way to tell a long form story without, say, having your friends come over 3 weekends in a row to watch movies that are 3 hours plus. To harken back to our initial topic there. But so National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Let's talk about this movie. Released in 1989, written by John Hughes and directed by, hold please, Jeremiah S. Chechik, who I was like, I've never heard of this guy. What else has he done? The only other notable thing that I could find was the Avengers, and not like the Marvel Avengers, but the other Avengers movie with Uma Thurman. And but yeah, you know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like
Ray Fiennes,
yep.
Off the TV show.
Yep.
Wait,
cool.
Uma Thurman is an Avenger. Where can I watch this?
Yeah,
I'm not sure where you can
Connery's
find
the
this
bad
now.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was a largely, I think, a flop, like right when it came out. Like certainly people saw it, but I can't recall having talked to a single person in the last 15 years that's ever mentioned that movie before now.
That
but
thing came out in 98. Wow, that's a blast from the past, because I do remember watching this on more than one occasion. Huh. I don't know if you can stream it right now though. Wow.
It is available on YouTube. So as long as it doesn't have a garish red filter, I will be watching this later.
Maybe that'll add to the experience for you. I digress. This is the third film in the National Lampoon Vacation series, the first two of which were National Lampoon's Vacation and National Lampoon's European Vacation. It stars Chevy Chase, Beverly D'Angelo, Randy Quaid, Juliette Lewis, John Galecki, and has a supporting cast consisting of Brian Doyle Murray, Bill Murray's brother, the guy with the raspy voice. He plays the boss. Julie Louis-Dreyfus, Nicholas Guest, who I just found out was the brother of Christopher Guest. That's the other snotty neighbor, the yuppie neighbor that was next door to the Griswolds. John Randolph, Diane Ladd, and Mae Questel, who plays Aunt Bethany. And I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but if her voice sounds familiar, she was the voice of Betty Boop and Olive Oyl in the original cartoons. So very distinct voice, and I think has a great role in this for her small amount of screen time. My other quick little production tidbits are the music was by Angelo Badalamenti, who we just lost, the composer of Twin Peaks and other David Lynch films. So RIP. Again, a bizarre thing that I've seen this movie, I don't know, dozens of times and never knew that or paid attention to it, I guess. And then, of course, probably the least surprising, but I guess interesting bit of trivia is that Chris Columbus was originally attached to direct this, but left to make Home Alone after he realized in the pre-production phase that he could not work with Chevy Chase, which becomes a theme in Chevy Chase's career over and over again until he's basically declared just toxic completely. He is Hollywood poison at this point. Nobody will work with him. So not surprised there, but without, I guess, him leaving this project, we may not have gotten the Home Alone that we know and love. So hey, every cloud has a silver lining, I guess.
So are you saying Chevy Chase's character is maybe a bit too close to the actor himself?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that because I do have a character whiplash topic here. I do want to discuss Clark Griswold as specifically as a character. But my last little bit of production trivia that, again, I learned this time just preparation for the podcast is the Yuppie Neighbor's House. So Julie Louis-Dreyfus and Nicholas Guest is actually the Murtaugh family house from all 4 Lethal Weapon movies because it is filmed on the Warner Brothers backlot. So big studios typically have like a neighborhood that's just built with facades. So if it looks recognizable, that is why, which I thought was kind of cool. All right, let's jump into it. I want to get initial impressions, and let me see what order you guys are in my layout, and I'm just going to go vertical again. All right, that puts May up first. So May, hit me with your impressions of Christmas Vacation.
This is a movie that I think if you just watched like a 5-minute clip of it, like any 5-minute clip, you could tell exactly what year it came out. And I thought like there's some classic gags in here. I would say like half the jokes aged like milk for me, but there were some pretty cool iconic scenes. The road rage scene is a pretty strong opener. And I enjoyed the ending with the reindeer getting blown up by waste fumes.
Sent off to the Star Spangled Banner, which is
yeah, honestly, so that was great. And that's all I gotta say.
Totally fine. I'm sure we'll get into it more. Will, it's been a while since you've seen this, so what did you make of it on a rewatch with a little bit of separation?
It's funny. I don't know if I've actually when I was watching it, I realized I don't think I've seen it completely. I think that I've seen bits and pieces over the years. And rewatching it or watching it for the first time in its entirety, I could definitely say that it's not from an entertainment perspective, it's not really my jam. But that's mostly because I'm not big into cringe comedy. And I feel like even though maybe this wasn't what it was considered back then when this film came out, for me these days, it feels like it's in the realm of cringe comedy. And I was kind of reading a little bit more about like why cringe is sort of entertaining to some folks, to understand why it is that I don't like it. And I came across an interesting article that basically said that since cringe is very much like, it has to be humor that's relatable enough to the audience that they can feel like it would be somebody they know. But at the same time, it's sort of like the spectrum of you either fall in line with the folks that over empathize with the characters that are dealing with it, and so you feel embarrassed for them, or like you actively feel like you're in the room with them while it's going on. Or you get the other folks that find it funny because they can detach themselves from that to the extent of they're just watching this train wreck happen and they find it funny because it's happening to somebody else, but it's not them. And so there are parts where I can't detach myself enough. I think that's why I don't like other sort of like traditional cringe comedy, like Fleabag or to some extent like Meet the Parents as a film example. Like
it's the one I was going to bring up.
Yeah, it's like I just feel so bad for him. Like if I had to go through that, And especially like some of the humor today, like you mentioned the road rage stuff. I mean, like today we have so much of that that's like you can see it just in YouTube clips of people just losing their stuff, that it's like it might have been funny back then, but it's a little too real for me now with how bad some folks drive out there. And so it's like that. We'll probably talk a little bit more about it, so I won't go too much further. Other than like, some of the sexual innuendo is awkward, to say the least, if not just way inappropriate now by today's standards. And just some of the interactions with the family members, man, where you're just like, I don't know. For me, it gets grating. However, to play devil's advocate, if from the perspective of cringe, I think it does very well at what it does do, which, if that's the point, then yes, you have succeeded. And I have to say, hands down, Aunt Bethany is my favorite when she starts like, you mentioned the Star Spangled Banner, but wasn't she like reciting the Pledge of Allegiance when they
Yeah.
asked her to say grace? And I was like, yes, this is awesome. And from a purely slapstick perspective, because I do actually like slapstick more than cringe, I will say that watching it was when Clark gets the sled and he goes down the hill and like flies through traffic. I think stuff to like that I found much more entertaining because it was just so completely over the top, that it didn't really feel as awkward as some of the other social interactions. So that is
I
my
totally
very
agree with
long-winded
you. Yeah, on that one, Will. Like I do think like the snow sledding scene was the one that actually had me laughing out loud.
Mhm.
Yeah, I always like, it's interesting that so these movies are so different from one another, like all the vacation films.
Mm.
Tonally, like they recast the kids like every film. Sometimes they don't seem to get much older, even though like a decade plus will go by, like sometimes, which is weird. Um, but the one thing that's always persisted is that he's like a food additive scientist, which doesn't gel at all with like who you like the man that you spend time with. Doesn't
Mm.
strike me as somebody who's like particularly, I don't know, like scientific. I don't know. It's just, I always thought it was a weird occupation, but they build it into things like the sledding, scene where he's adding, that's what it is. It's a chemical they've been playing around with at work.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so this is like one of those films that I always give kind of a disclaimer where I'm like, hey, I love this. It's a movie I watch every year for Christmas, but I recognize that like I grew up on it. So there is like a lot of rose-colored glasses effect, I'm sure, with it. I also think that it's such a shame. I mean, Chevy Chase like was brilliant at like what he did. It's physical comedy, especially. Like that guy has a great ability to, expressions and sort of like body posture, so like him whacking himself in the face like in the attic, like little bits like that. Like he was always really good at that stuff, some of that dry like delivery. So it is kind of a shame he's a prick in real life, and like again, that's been sort of confirmed several times over. It's like not even a surprise when you another like difficult story comes up about him. People are like, yeah, sure. That being said, I do love this movie. I recognize that, yeah, a lot of it hasn't aged particularly like well, but it's one of those things I'm going to just kind of like be like, yeah, 80s, am I right? I don't know. Like, um, and again, we'll talk about Clark specifically as a character because I do get whiplash, like in really all of these films. Like there are kind of repeated sequences of like either near infidelity or like infidelity fantasies, and it makes it hard, I think, as a modern audience to put really like empathize with him as a character. But it is one of my favorite movies, probably because I grew up with like a functional dysfunctional like family, if that makes sense. So kind of back to what Will was saying of being able to like really sort of like, this is familiar, like this was familiar. I had a very large family just even on my mom's side alone. There was a lot of like a bunch of Roman Catholic Italians, like everyone kind of yelling over each other, things going sideways, all of that stuff, like in the way that makes Will feel uncomfortable actually makes me feel comfortable in a way, because I'm like, I have a lot of memories that are like this, and it's not things going sideways particular that like you look back on with fondness, but it's sort of getting through those things together, right? Like kind of telling a story about a disaster at a family gathering or vacation that ends up working out okay. Like I think that's the part of it that I've always sort of latched onto and appreciated about this film, because I had many family gatherings and vacations that weren't smooth, but because of sort of our love for one another and everyone just kind of eventually pulling together, it ended up working out more or less, even if it wasn't perfect. Kind of stuff you can laugh about in hindsight. So but it's
So
interesting, I think. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to interject real quick. So that makes me think about the line that he has at the very end that says, "I made it." Have you had an "I made it" moment at a
Many
get
times.
together?
Many times. Yeah. Yeah. And
Awesome.
I think that like that's the stuff that stands out. Not to put I was gonna say we should do a Will's like psychiatric corner like segment now, like on
It's
this, like
always
after how
going to
many
come
times.
up every time, every time.
But to put myself on the couch, so to speak, for a moment here, I do think like the fact that a lot of those things, as crazy and as boisterous and as like, I don't know, like rough as some of those gatherings could be, I do have a lot of memories of like kind of, sometimes in that big family, people being quick to anger, but also quick to forgive, like a lot of like sort of hugging and like I'm sorry's like at the end, which is like, I think that that helps. Look back at those gatherings with a little bit of humor and overall goodwill. And so, yeah, that's why this movie kind of speaks to me in a lot of ways, I think. But so let's get into some of the nitty gritty. I just realized I forgot to recap the plot, but I think you could describe this movie as more or less like it's the loose plot is just a man trying to have a large Christmas gathering at his house. Everything is going wrong. And the film is basically just a series of vignettes of like one disaster after another. That's pretty accurate, right? Like everything from decorating to meals, to family dynamics, nothing seems to work out, and his frustration level increases. And then there's sort of just a side plot that carries it through, where he's waiting on a Christmas bonus check to put in a pool, right? So there's your quick recap. But I wanted to start off by asking everybody who their favorite character was. I'm pretty sure for none of us it's going to be Clark. So, May, do you have a favorite character?
I kind of like the I'm blanking on his name, but the brother who comes in on the RV.
Oh, Cousin Eddie. Yeah.
Cousin Eddie, yeah.
That's the correct choice.
Well, just because like he's a good foil to Clark, obviously, because it's like he's completely unfazed about anything, and like it's instead of him making plans that go wrong, he doesn't have any plans and just still manages to screw things up. But yeah, he's good comic relief. I think he's funny. Arguably kinder and more well-intentioned than Clark.
Yeah.
And is responsible for that stunning finale with the reindeer. So I think I'm gonna have to pick Eddie.
Yeah. The older I get, the more I kind of sympathize with him as a character. Like, yeah, he has comic relief as well, but I'm like, I think you could argue you might be a better person than Clark Griswold in a lot of ways. Like, he's kind of used as a bit of a like, not really punching bag, but like he's the buffoon, right? Like of the movie. Yet like he seems to have some better qualities. We'll get into that, but he also, I think, has some of the best lines in the film as well. Like I love that. I wish we had that money back that we paid the preacher that was screwing the hockey player. And Clark's like, well, he's like, what about the kids? He's like, well, those kids can fend for themselves. Like, just like, I love.
I also
Randy
do
Quaid.
love characters that take things literally.
Yeah, absolutely.
The soft spot for that.
How about you, Will? Do you have a favorite character?
I don't know, man. Aunt Becky really had it for me with the with her form of grace. That was
Aunt
pretty
Bethany.
good. Yeah. She just cracks me up, man. I don't know. I think it was just the fact that she was always so cheerful. She was a complete space cadet because I guess supposed to maybe just not really have all her marbles anymore. But like, I don't know. She was just one of the happiest people there. It didn't matter what was going on. So I think for me, I think to some extent though, I like Ellen, Clark's wife, just because she stays so calm despite all the crazy stuff that happens. She is sort of the voice of reason that just never gets listened to, though. Every time that Clark gets it in his head that he wants to do something, he just completely ignores what she says, which Take that as you will. For any stereotype of typical cisgendered hetero dudes, but that's I don't know, that seems to track pretty well. But the I feel like that, and then yeah, so between those two, it'd either have to be Becky or it would be Ellen for me.
So to this day, anytime somebody at our dinner tables like he wants to say grace without missing a beat, somebody is going to say Grace. She passed away 30 years ago. It is
Awesome.
inevitable. Somebody in my family will pipe up with that joke. I think those are both good picks.
Do they also
from
go into the Pledge of Allegiance?
That would anger some of my more religious relatives, probably. That's maybe a step too far, but I think if I'm feeling froggy or I've had one too many drinks that I can blame it on next time, maybe I'll see how that goes. But
Do
for me, it's hands down Cousin Eddie. I think, like I said, he's got the best lines in the film. He pretty much steals the show once he arrives. Like, I feel like the film is kind of sort of missing something up until his arrival, and then like once he gets there, I feel like it fires on all cylinders because Clark has a foil. And I just I love his earnestness. He's talking about his kids like preparing for his future, and he's like, college, he's like, nah, carnival. And then just his little speeches and stuff. He is completely earnest and proud of his family and what they have in his own way, and has absolutely no shame, and it leads to some absolutely great moments. So yeah, it's Cousin Eddie for sure. And I think what does Clark say? It's like his heart's bigger than his brain. Which
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great way to describe that character. I wanted to see if either of you have like a standout scene next. So just kind of talk about like if you had a favorite, because this really largely is like one sort of isolated scene that is like about something stupid or funny that happens after. Like the plot is very loose on this movie, like admittedly. So does anybody have a favorite, or I should say, May, do you have a favorite scene that stood out to you?
Yeah, actually, it's maybe the only I mean, I guess the ending is somewhat sincere with the boss coming in and like agreeing to give him bonuses. But besides that, I feel like the only actual kind of like sweet, sincere scene is when Clark gets locked in the attic and he's like looking around, putting on any clothes he can find, and he finds old tapes from his like family Christmases, and he's like sitting there watching them and like seems genuinely moved. And it's like kind of the only time he seems to kind of like let down the wall of anger and sarcasm for a moment. And so I thought that was kind of sweet. And then of course he drops through the ceiling, but
of course,
briefly, yeah. It is sincere.
That's a great pick. Again, like we'll get to like him in a second, but like it is always been well. Now I'll save this until we talk about him. I don't want to like go down too far down a tangent. I promise we'll come back to that. Will, how about you?
I think it's a toss up. There's I really like, for like the sort of the sincere moment, kind of off of what May was mentioning. I really like the scene where Clark is talking to Ruby Sue, who's the daughter of Eddie, and when she's just kind of explaining to him about not believing in Santa Claus, and he's trying to convince her that Santa Claus is real. And it's just, I don't know, there was something just very touching about that little exchange together. And it was still funny too, but it wasn't as sort of slapstick over the top as everything else. It was like a very grounded moment. So I appreciated that. But conversely, I also really liked the fact, and I'm a cat lover, so I'll admit that before saying this, but the scene that I've got up behind me for those who are watching our YouTube video, is where a cat that has been brought in, also I believe by Aunt Bethany, right?
Yes,
got repackaged.
It's her cat.
Yeah, starts screwing around with the Christmas tree, which I'm immediately thinking, okay, so how's the cat gonna bite it? Pulls out a cord or something, and the tree goes off. So Clark goes over, reconnects it and instantly fries the cat underneath the chair. And so they pull the chair back and see like just this scorch mark, like it's a cartoon of this dead animal. And I don't know, something about that I just thought was really funny in a morbid way, because I've known of cats in my extended family that have like met untimely demises underneath chairs. So I think there was just something about that I related to. Strangely enough, in terms of cringe comedy, that didn't faze me nearly as much as some of the other stuff. But yeah, so there's that.
I think it's the Looney. Oh, go ahead.
What kind of chairs do you have, Will?
So it wasn't anything that we like that I was responsible for. I'm not trying to like incriminate myself, but there was like I think on my wife's side, I want to say there was a family member who inadvertently sat on a chair and crushed a cat. And it was underneath like a rocker and didn't realize that the cat was there. And it was so quick that it was just like he was gone. And so in some ways, it's something that was sad like that, to then see it sort of made into a cartoon in this film seemed a little more, I don't know. Again, I say it's morbid, right? But it's sort of like the circumstances behind it. For some reason, I found it much more humorous to sort of laugh at in this film versus like the reality of what that would be like. So
yeah, it's Looney Tune effect, right? Like there's the outline like of the cat, like, and it is very cartoony. So yeah, no, I'm with you. Like it just goes to show, I guess, like it's all about like editing and sort of like how something like that is presented, where it can be like comedic fodder or like really sad depending on. But yeah, that's a pretty good one. And then of course like the follow-up lines of like again Eddie coming in with the best line of like, woo, if that cat had 9 lives, you just spin them all. Like like it's so great.
Yeah,
it's so great. Yeah, that's a pretty good one. I don't know. I think it's so hard for me to pick because I've seen this movie like I said, probably dozens of times, like honestly. A standout scene for me, like not maybe a favorite, but I'll just pick a standout, is like the arrival of all the relatives. Just all the little snippets of dialogue, especially with like the older parents. The older I get, the more I relate to, of like immediately we're launching into like health problems and like I've got hemorrhoids and they just took a pint of fluid out of my lower back, and like, Rusty, if you rub my bunion, I'll give you a quarter, and like all that stuff. Like, and just it I think perfectly contrasts like what Clark has in his mind with like the reality, like right at like off the rip of like, oh, okay, this is what it's gonna be like in reality. But that scene's always very funny to me because I like anybody that can pull off overlapping dialogue, which is harder than you would think. Like in a movie, very few directors do it. Robert Altman was super famous for it. The guy made MASH in Nashville. And I think that part works really well, and you can get a lot out of it, like kind of the more you listen to it or the more you watch that scene. So we've kind of touched on it already, but I do want to talk about Clark Griswold as a character, because I feel like there's so many inconsistencies with this guy. You both have talked about sort of earnest, sincere, sweet moments with him, which you're like, okay, like this is a guy that's trying to do like this nice thing for all these people and wants to make it like a nice Christmas. He's putting in effort, right? He offers Eddie to help give the kids Christmas. And then you have like him in the lingerie department of like the department store, and some of his like outbursts, or even like I've always found it again, as I've gotten older, especially like some of his little sidebar comments to Eddie are really nasty and judgmental. Like, again, like I understand that like there's somebody that you didn't plan on coming to your house and he's imposing, but he's really kind of elitist and like sarcastic and nasty to Eddie. So I wanted to get your thoughts about sort of that the two sides of that character and what you make of all that. I always get a little bit of whiplash with Clark Griswold because I don't ever know what to fully make of him, and it's hard for me to fully ever root for him because he'll do something shitty after doing something nice, and I'm like, well, what am I supposed to make of this? So May, back to you. Thoughts on Clark Griswold?
Yeah, so I want to go back to something Will said with like cringe depending on like either being close enough that something is recognizable and sympathetic, or far away enough you can just kind of like be so far outside the situation you can point and laugh.
Yeah.
And I feel like part of the reason this movie didn't land for me was like I recognize Clark in people I've known in a bad way. And so it's just this like, I don't want to be reminded of this.
It's fair. Yeah.
Like I don't see those things as character inconsistencies necessarily. I feel like a lot of men of this era were kind of like expected to have a family like Clark has, whether or not that fit their actual desires. So I think that's part of why you see the nastiness and the infidelity and stuff like that, is just like he's in this life that he doesn't necessarily maybe fully want. And it just comes out in all the worst ways. That being said, like I remember having genuine anxiety during parts of the like road rage thing, or like during his violent outbursts, because I've been around guys that have done that, or been afraid in those situations, and yeah, just like a little uncomfortably close to home. So I didn't like Clark. I laughed whenever he got hurt, but that was about it.
I think too, like we as an audience, we try not to like bring like our outside understanding of like an actor like Chevy Chase into the understanding of the role. But the more that like I learn about Chevy Chase and stuff, it's hard not to kind of do that a little bit, to project a bit of that. And I think that also makes it tough for him. But you say, so I think it's an interesting point of like, maybe he's not built for family life, right? And it's more of like a thing of the times. But it's weird because there are scenes like where they try really hard to make you as an audience member think that like he wants to be like the best possible like dad and like husband, right? Like whether they're successful or not like is a totally different issue, but they try at least to like put him forth, right, as somebody who he's doing like all he's putting in the pool for like his family. He wants to fly them all out. And then you contrast that with some of his other behaviors, and it doesn't always like work for me.
Is it? I mean, are those things really for his family, or is it for him to kind of like get an ego boost?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I have like an answer, and like I'm trying to keep the context of it to like this film, right? Like,
right.
Because the other vacation entries sort of have a similar premise, just with a different packaging. So wanting to do like a family trip versus like here, whether it's kind of a stay-at-home thing, but it's always the same thing where like he has the idea and like what he wants it to be, and then of course the reality of it's totally different. But similarly in those films, they do try to kind of present it as like he wants everyone to have a good time and experience the things that he loved growing up, or maybe things he didn't get to experience as he was growing up, and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know that they're always successful in that. But Will, what do you make of Clark Griswold?
I think Clark needed the internet for porn. I think that would have solved his problem real fast. No, I mean, I do actually think that. Yeah, I think that would have solved so many problems. But yeah, off of that, I think it is an ego thing, because I mean, when he thinks about the pool, it's not like he really, I don't know, he was so excited to do it. He put down a deposit when he was banking on having money that we all knew the setup just based on it. Like on it now, you could tell like something bad is going to happen. So that, and the fact that it's like from the very beginning, they go out to get the tree and his daughter's cold, but he doesn't care. She's like literally freezing. And it's like, oh, don't worry, she'll warm up later, kind of a thing. Or puts his son to work setting up all these Christmas lights, which apparently seems to take like all afternoon or all day, depending on how you want to look at it. And then becomes obsessed with trying to get them fixed when nothing will light up. So yeah, I don't know. I think it is an ego thing. He doesn't really seem to, I mean, he seems to have this vision of what happiness will be like when it's all done. And I think even Ellen had made the comment at one point where it's like nothing ever lives up to his expectations. And he's like, oh, when has that ever been a thing? And she starts rattling off this whole list. And then he's just like, I'm going to bed. Like completely shuts down, doesn't want to face reality. So I'm like, yeah, it's the ego thing for me too, May. I'd have to agree.
Ellie does too. I don't know if you can hear her.
Little wolves. I appreciate it. You tell him, Ellie. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the internet porn thing because a detail that like I have always noticed is that like initially when he's having sort of the pool fantasy with the lingerie salesperson on the diving board, you're like, oh, like he's masturbating, right? But no, like when the little girl comes in, like I remember being alarmed where I was like, oh, but his hands are very clearly like on the wall, and I have no doubt that they wanted like no ambiguity about that, like
Mm.
she's not walking into like a grown man like masturbating at his window, like, so his hands are very strategically placed like high up on the wall. There's no question about it, which I've always found to be an interesting little detail about, and probably a smart choice on their part. Honestly, the scene would probably be a lot less touching, the one that follows where he's talking about Santa Claus and all of that. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's like I have very mixed feelings about Clark Griswold. I actually really love all of the original run like of the Vacation films, even though I am the first to admit that some of them have aged like absolutely terribly, or some bits of them have aged terribly, I should say. Just because there are like still things that are incredibly funny. But he's always been kind of just a jerk. Like there's a similar kind of plot line where in the original Vacation he sees it's Christy Brinkley like was like just becoming sort of a thing in a Ferrari like over and over like on their road trip, and then like in the hotel or the motel where he's staying out with his wife like decides to go skinny dipping with her because they've had a fight and she's like wanting to sleep with him, and Ellen comes out and like finds them and like obviously is like pissed that they're like skinny dipping together. And then like sort of the way that movie handles that is like obviously he's like, I shouldn't be here, I'm sorry. And they almost like play it off like I don't know, not that it's like Ellen's fault, but like I don't know, like it's just it hasn't aged very well, and it's one of those moments in that series, and there's several of which where you're like, you're kind of a bad husband, and not a great father. Um, that being said, I do think there are bits about the character that work when he's not being nasty. Like some of his sarcasm is funny. The idea behind Clark Griswold as a character is not necessarily a bad one, of wanting to do like a father, husband, whatever, wanting to put on like a great vacation or it's something that is like relatable. Again, I think the question is more or less like how successfully do they, pull that off, right? With making him sympathetic. And I don't think he's entirely, again, like with more time and distance, I feel colder towards Clark Griswold than I do like other characters in the movie. So I'm glad that like obviously it's about as subtle as like a sledgehammer, but that you all picked up on that too, where there is some sort of inconsistencies and his personality traits.
Yeah, going out with the chainsaw was a little I don't know, would not have felt safe.
I held my breath when he like turns when his son comes out and he is running the chainsaw and suddenly turns to talk to the son. And I was like, oh wait, no, this is PG-13. He'll be fine.
Good talk, Dad. Yeah. I do like the little shout out to the movie that we had a 50-50 shot of watching, which is It's a Wonderful Life, where the character of George Bailey is annoyed by a loose newel post in that film. So it's a little shout out when he just chainsaws it off in this one. Nice. Just a weird little Easter egg.
I don't know what you have planned next, Chris, but I would at some point love to talk about Ellen as well as a character.
Yeah, no, please. I only had one other quick thing to touch on, so that's a great follow up to Clark.
Yeah, because like I love her. I think Beverly D'Angelo did a fantastic job playing her. But it's just like, yeah, I think similar to Clark, she's kind of the almost a parody of the like infinitely patient and intelligent wife, which are like good character traits, but she feels very stiff because that's all she can be. I kind of was hoping that like when he's having his fantasy scene, she'd get to go have her own.
I'm trying to think what the equivalent would be. maybe like a nice fireman. I don't know. Like
I don't know. She's thinking about
time.
that pool. There's a really hot lifeguard.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I want to say she gets her revenge, so to speak, in I might be mixing up my movies, but I feel like in Vegas Vacation, it's like Wayne Newton like seduces her and like is like whining and dining her and stuff, and like it's kind of an inverse of roles. You know, we're talking like mid '90s at this point, so things are progressing a little bit, in terms of like film stereotypes and whatnot.
Progress,
But
women's infidelity.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But they do allow her to kind of be that person a little bit, and for once, Clark has to sort of like sweat it and deal with the fact that he's had shitty behavior and it's maybe having poor effects on her. No,
Yeah.
Beverly D'Angelo is great. I think he's a moron personally. Like, she's a beautiful woman. She solves half of his fucking problems for him. Like why are you going out for hamburgers when you got prime rib at home, baby? Like, he's just an amazing. And Beverly D'Angelo is so fucking funny too. Like, in all these movies, but like in some of the other stuff she's done too, of course. But yeah,
Her facial expressions are great.
Yeah,
definitely.
I of course, as somebody who's struggled with smoking my entire life, sympathize with the like her like immediately just reaching out for the bag that's probably been up there for a few months. It's her emergency stash, and just like lighting up, and she's like, it's Christmas and we're all in misery, and then the mom's like, are you smoking? And she puts it out and is like, no, and chops the lettuce. It's great stuff. Yeah, I'm trying to think like what else about the character of Ellen. She seems to be a more gracious host. Like, the thing that always does my head in is like, this whole thing is Clark's idea, and he's fucking miserable the entire movie about all these people that are there. Like, right? And it's like, this was your idea, man. Like, it's not like they invited themselves, except for cousin Eddie. Like, he's the only one that does it. I think Ellen's a much more gracious host. Like, she is constantly reminding him to be polite, and it might be his last Christmas, and she kind of brings the idea to Clark about doing presents for the kids, that kind of thing. So, you like Ellen, Will, as a character?
Oh yeah, she's great. I love the fact that she was sort of not the first person, but the second person to flip the right switch so that all of his lights finally came on for the decorations outside. It may not have like been something that anybody realized that was the fix, but the fact that she's the one to do it after having tried to help him and he's still there fighting about the same piece over and over again, like that's somehow going to fix it. Like, the definition of crazy is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And so for her, she goes off and does something else and it works. And he's still there arguing over that same chord. And I'm like, yeah, this pretty much explains this whole dynamic.
Yeah. The first one is by accident, but she goes out there with a purpose. Like, she has the light bulb moment where she like literally where she goes into the garage with a purpose and like knows like what it is that's going to fix it.
Also, they need way more surge protectors, dude. Holy shit. I was waiting for something to catch on fire from that.
Everything's daisy chained.
Oh man.
Right. Well, the last like topic I have, and this is really only if it's relevant, but I talked at the top of the show about one of the reasons that this movie has endured as a classic for me and is still kind of relatable is some of the more like recognizable like family dynamics, or not really dynamics so much as like situations, and sometimes the best gatherings or vacations can still be disastrous but have like fond memories and that kind of thing. I wanted to know if either of you two have like either like a recognizable like relative or like dynamic or something in here that did strike you, like something that hit any kind of close to home. And you don't have to say names or out yourself. You can keep it fun here. I don't want you to call out like toxic relatives or anything if you're not wanting to, but like
I've already like very graciously inserted a family member's like cat murder, so
yeah.
The bar has been set. It's not pretty hard to clear.
We can cut that if you want. Like, I don't have to keep member. I can always chop that out if you're like, on second thought.
It's fine.
Okay,
that's fine. I'm good.
Okay. How about you, mate? Is there anything that struck you as like somewhat close to home, either in characters or situations?
I guess so I'll be honest, I hate the holidays usually. There are just it never blows up like it does in this movie, but there's always just like a lot of old arguments and tension and stuff. So I do relate to like when they're all sitting down to eat and just trying to make it through the fucking meal without
The
anything
turkey
else
jerky.
going wrong.
Yeah.
It's like that's what my holidays feel like. It's just like everyone's just trying to make it through the day without some bomb going off.
I've certainly had holidays like that, so I can understand. Yeah, that's not always fun. And I think what makes that scene in the film like especially miserable is that like nothing is really like, well, the main dish is like not cooked well. So you can't even enjoy like the joy of like having a delicious like moist turkey. It's just jerky basically that they're crunching on and dipping in gravy. I think I've kind of already shared like where how like like in general terms like how this relates to I guess my childhood and growing up and things like that. I will say like, well, outbursts and sort of yelling and cursing and screaming aside, I do sympathize like sometimes with Clark in that like it can be, it can feel horrible, like a disaster sometimes when things don't go right when you're hosting something. So again, getting older, like when like you plan to have like a big function and something goes terribly wrong, like the pressure of that and sort of like how anxious it can make you is something that I relate to more as an adult than I probably did as a kid, right? Where it's like as a kid you're like, yeah, that man's just he's yelling and screaming, like that's funny. As an adult I'm like, oh, that's a little, that I know that feeling. You hope that it doesn't get to that point where there's an outburst, but so I do relate to that a bit more, which is a great way how one of the things I love about films is that as you change and grow as a person, different things speak to you. So
the last thing I can relate to is the arguing over what size Christmas tree will actually fit in the house.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's always a fun one.
Oh yeah.
Amazing.
Or what size you need sometimes, because like
Yeah.
depending on how high your ceilings are, how big your living room is, or in some cases in the past for us, it's like how long are we going to be actually in town to enjoy this thing? That has played a factor before. It's like we're going to be gone 2 weeks, out of the 4 that we're going to enjoy this thing. Maybe let's just go small like this year. So I feel that. Oh, quickly, the Yuppie Neighbors, like Julie Louis-Dreyfus and Nicholas Guest, like I enjoy those characters. I think they like are a good sounding board for some of the funnier like lines or comedy or whatever. I gotta shout out because Marianne always like laughs hysterically at like how like much it doesn't make sense, and it's a lot of it's to do with the lighting. But when the lights are coming on and off and they just fall down for like no reason, like it's like, oh, and again I know it's because they have to like allow you as the audience member to see where they are, but it is
Right.
kind of a silly stupid scene of like just like I'm just suddenly going to trip for no reason, like because the lights have gone off or come on. But it's good to see like a like this would have been the same year Seinfeld aired. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, like she's great as always. But what did you think of the Yuppie Neighbors? I gotta ask that since they do feature pretty prominently.
I feel like I'm a little bit too removed from that cultural moment to totally get why they're there. I was entertained actually during the light sequence, but
Yeah, no, it's entertaining for sure. It's one of those like movie magic things where you're like, like I get what they're going for. It does look a bit silly, but
yeah,
Yeah,
I would encourage them to put some of their money towards better blinds, but
maybe a bulletproof glass, given who they live next door to. Yeah. So to contextualize, like, so the yuppie movement was like largely seen as like a like selfish culture, right? So they're meant to be a stark contrast to Clark. So it's the two of them, no kids. Something now that a lot of people kind of view as like the dream, depending, like as societal
Guilty.
norms have shifted. Yeah, I mean, same. Not that I don't like kids. Kids are fine, just not for me. But like that's what they're kind of meant to be, is like, look at these two people who like just want to live their like life like free of like kids, and of course they're caricatures in a way because they don't want a Christmas tree, and then maybe we do, and like all their stuff is very like fancy, and they're meant to kind of just be like these like selfish like snobs that live next door, and just the antithesis of what Clark and his family stands for. I will point out that they're pretty much the victims of like every like bit of like, they don't really, I mean, yes, they're dicks, but like nothing that happens to them is something they necessarily like deserve, you know. So I do sometimes feel a little teensy bit bad for them, just trying to enjoy their holidays in the way they can, and nope.
I don't even feel like they're that rude. Isn't the first thing
Yeah.
you hear, like the first interaction they have with Clark is him basically threatening to shove a tree up their ass? Like,
Well, they do instigate that, like by saying like, where do you think you're gonna put a tree that big, like Griswold? Like, it's a little bit antagonistic. I feel like it's a justify, like, and you get the
some
idea
big
that
escalation.
there's been some, you can tell there's been some tension there before. It is a funny thing to say, like, bend over and I'll show you. I love that.
I liked them. I was gonna say, yeah, they're just living their life, man. They got all the stuff they want, they're happy, and then some, maniac from next door just like damages their property and assaults them
The
with a
dog assaults
squirrel.
him.
Yeah, but it's not, it's their dog, so
Yeah, I know.
yeah. Oh, I'll come to it in a second, but yeah, overall, in answer to your question, I do like their neighbors, and I feel bad for them because ultimately, yeah, even if they're kind of antagonistic, like by today's standards, man, they're so tame, and in some ways, they're the victims.
Oh,
So
I think
I
almost
mean,
totally. Like a couple
yeah,
of sarcastic words is not worth your stereo being broken,
no,
a tree coming through your window. Like,
no.
again, I'm gonna say them tripping down the stairs and shit. That's kind of their like May say, get some better blinds. Maybe just don't stop walking if the lights go off. They'll just like fall over. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely getting mauled by a dog. I feel like all that is firmly like them in the victim column. There we go.
Oh yeah. And I apologize. There's a helicopter, a plane, or something going overhead right now. So one
What'd you
moment.
do, man? We've had two films with SWAT teams
Hey,
back to
look,
back. Like,
I'm not trying to have the cops break in my house right now, okay? Like I feel like ultimately I don't know, Clark may enjoy that bonus for now, but he's gonna end up having to use that to pay for like insurance claims, right? Like after this is all over.
yeah,
Lawsuits.
Yeah. Yep. But
absolutely.
yeah, I think the only other thing that came to mind, and I'm glad that you mentioned kind of the end of the film, was it would be wouldn't it be nice if like you had a disagreement with your boss and the solution was somehow to hold them hostage on Christmas Eve, and suddenly they would see the light and become like Ebenezer Scrooge, and suddenly decide, you know what, that's fine, whatever we were going to pay you before, just add 20% to it. And then the cops show up and he's still like, nope, I've learned my lesson. And I'm like, this is so out of left field as like a way to like resolve everything. It was like, it was so innocent, and it was in some ways kind of nice after all the crazy stuff that had come before. But I just thought, this is so random. Like, for only this would happen in a film like this, where it was like, yep, it's okay. You know what? I fucked up. You're right.
The message is
I'm
largely
sorry.
like money will solve all your problems too. Like, it's kind of the message there. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not that I'm advocating anybody try and like abduct their boss at Christmas. We'll just go ahead and just say that now for legal purposes on this podcast.
Yeah.
No killing of cats, no abducting your boss. Please do not hit on anybody at the beauty counter. Be very kind to your spouse. All right. Anything else that I missed? Don't abuse your children. And also, yeah, that's it. I think I'm good.
We won't be held liable for any, results by doing this, but how do you know that you like won't get a consequence free like bonus if you kidnap your boss? I'm saying like go out and try it. Like if you're feeling so
just
inclined,
once,
you never know. I mean,
you only
I'm
live
not
once,
responsible
man.
for whatever happens, but yeah.
Parody.
Yeah.
Just make sure you put a bow around him so they know it's a Christmas kidnapping.
Yeah, that's right. Get your, get your brother to do it, and it's fine.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Well, thanks for talking about one of the stupidest, but definitely one of my favorite movies. It is totally okay if it didn't land for you. I always know it's a roll of the dice, so that's why I give my disclaimer. And I recognize, again, a lot of rose-colored glasses kind of stuff going on here, having seen this like probably the first time when I'm 6. But I'm glad you guys got to watch it. you'll understand, if nothing else, all the stupid cultural references to it. So there you go. Let's have a little game of Pitch Storm. Who's gonna host? Oh, by the way, well, Will's
I
already
got you
reaching. He's
covered.
like,
Oh,
he's
okay.
like,
Quick draw. I was going to offer, but
No, we good. So, who wants to go first, or do we want to flip a coin?
um,
I'll let May choose.
I,
Would you rather go first or?
I was going to say we should flip a coin.
Okay, I've got one on the game board here, or I can put one on the game board if you want.
Let's do
Go
it.
for it. Yeah, flip it on the game board.
I call heads.
Okie dokie. You call heads. And there's video evidence. It is heads.
All right.
Cool. And I think I've got everything in order here. So you wanted to choose a person or a plot, I think was the two, right? You could
Yes.
select.
I would like to choose a person first.
Cool. All
Or
right.
a character. I don't know if all the characters are people.
That is valid. You might end up with an animal or maybe even a brave little toaster. So let's see what we got. All right. So your first three options are for a person to have a magical nanny for a wealthy family,
Okay.
a snobby art critic, or a has-been professional wrestler.
Oh,
Ooh.
professional wrestler for sure.
Hell yeah. All right. Awesome. So just as a recap, that is a has-been professional wrestler tries to stop a ferry boat from sinking. Your time starts now.
All right. So we have a film starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, set
Nice.
in the jungles of the Amazon. Dwayne has moved to the Amazon after retiring from a star-studded wrestling career to live a quiet life of leading expeditions through the jungle. And one day, he sees a ferry boat in distress. It's going quickly down the river, approaching rapids and a waterfall. What will Dwayne do?
I'm going
Well,
to stop you right there and say also, let's add a really hot love interest. Like, we want this to be the perfect date movie.
as Dwayne is swimming into the river to save the ferry boat, he becomes what he does best, a rock, and stops it from flying down the river. Unfortunately, the impact causes a beautiful woman to fall over the side of the boat, and he must choose between the most beautiful woman he's seen in his life and every other person on this boat.
Cool.
Classic
If
trolley problem.
you want to finish that last thought, yeah, you can.
Stay tuned.
All
Be
right,
great
all right.
cut place for the
Yeah.
trailer.
Right. Some epic music behind it. Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Who would you have play opposite The Rock?
Oh,
Just out of
Scarlett Johansson, of course.
No
That will be
hesitation.
noted.
I
Yeah.
like it.
Awesome. May, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, it is your turn, sir. Would you prefer to choose a person or a plot?
I'm gonna do person as well.
Awesome.
Or character.
Your
I should say.
options. That is true. I'll be specific about that. A character, not a person. You could either choose a witch living on the edge of town, a beguiling cult leader, or a genie trapped in a magic lamp.
Oh, these are all like supernatural, man.
Mhm.
Do I want to go a genie, cult leader? I'm gonna go with the cult leader. Seems like it has the most potential.
I really hope the plot is something super mundane.
A cult leader takes his dog to the store. No.
Tries to run an ice cream shop. Yay.
Hey, I like that one. Oh, all right, dude. Hold up. A cult leader fights in bloody gladiator death matches. Just as a recap, a beguiling cult leader fights in bloody gladiator death matches. Your time starts now.
All right. So this film stars Woody Harrelson as a beguiling cult leader. His cult name is the House of 1,000 Nipples, and he fights in a garb with just the nipples exposed. And the way he recruits other people is, he kills them And then he also has necromantic powers. So he
I'm going to
raises
stop you
them.
right there, sir. And I also think, all right, so what you got is great. That's cool. But I think we also need to make sure that we include with the main character, he needs to have a Samsung Galaxy to save the day. All right, we need to have we have a deal with Samsung. So
Yep.
you gotta put that in there.
Well, as a great marketing ploy for their next phone, that is how he resurrects the people that he kills and recruits. As he plugs in the Samsung Galaxy, pulls up the app, and just hits one button, resurrect, and up they go. And that's how he recruits his members. Oddly enough, they are against iPhone users, so that is the main target of their sort of like harassment and antagonist. So it'll be an army of iPhone
Ding.
users. All right.
You can finish your thought. Go for it.
I was gonna say versus a bunch of Samsung Galaxy users for the climactic final battle. So.
Wow.
Well, you have to give that to Chris. I will not accept it.
I mean,
I don't know. Yours is pretty funny too. I'm just
Damn.
imagining Dwayne the Rock Johnson turning into a rock to stop the ferry boat is pretty great.
I feel like on the one hand, we've got something that's very much like very, very good at being like self-parodying. So I feel like May, your stuff is good. Like I would definitely watch that as well. Chris, I think yours edged just a little bit farther on the scale. So I'm gonna have to go with you and Woody Harrelson and the nipples, man. I think
The
it's
House of 1,000 Nipples. Oh man.
Does Woody Harrelson have to have like 1,000 nipples for this movie?
I just like the two. Just the
he
two,
wears
right?
robes just with the nipples exposed. And like, that's just their thing. Yeah, I wish somebody could animate these for us. Like, so if we have any animators out there and you want to like go back and animate some of our pitch storm ideas, like please, I would love to see it.
That is
Oh my god.
so, get in touch with like the guys that did like Drunk History and just be like, who are your folks? Because those guys were pretty solid. So shout out to Drunk History, by the way. But
I love that show. May, you have our final film of the year, which is also a Christmas film.
Yes.
What have you got cooked up for Will and I?
I'm being nice because I'm only picking the first movie, not the whole trilogy, but we will be watching A Christmas Prince.
A Christmas Prince.
oh, yeah.
I believe this has come up on the podcast before, hasn't
Yes,
it?
it has. It's a Netflix original, came out in 2017. It is Netflix's stab at a Hallmark movie. If you have not seen a Hallmark Christmas movie or kind of know what they're about, I would recommend watching one before watching this as contrast. It's like you married a Hallmark movie with a like very cheesy thriller. It has a dear place in my heart. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it.
I can't fucking wait, honestly. After the original discussion about this film, I have seen let me preface it. I have not sat down and like intentionally like put on a Hallmark movie, but being at like other people's homes for Christmas and they've been on, I've seen sort of like probably 2 or 3 bits and pieces, like maybe not the entire films, but enough to definitely get the general gist, which seems to usually be like returning to a hometown, a unlikely romance that happens, right? That's a pretty typical plot line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's always some woman. It's in like a very high up professional busy job, but is feeling unfulfilled in her personal life, and the ultimate solution is that she needs to get married and move back to her small town and be a mom. So
she
this plays with that a little bit. Yeah.
All right, well hopefully she gets filled in this movie. Or fulfilled.
You'll find out.
Oh yeah. Well, no, I'm looking forward to this because I'm hoping you don't have to say one way or the other. I'm hoping they play with some conventions a little bit with this, and even if they don't, it'll be fine. But I did see like a collection of cover art from Hallmark movies, and like they are strikingly like similar, like down to like the color choices and like clothing articles, like so usually green and red for like each of the characters and like the positioning and stuff. So I'm looking forward to who's in this one again. Remind me.
So we have Rose McIver as our leading lady, and Ben Lamb as the prince.
Okay. Fair enough. I was not aware this is a franchise, so could we see a Christmas Prince multiverse, like at the way things are going in Hollywood right now? Is it gonna intersect with like another Christmas franchise like down the road?
It could. The sequels are well, I don't want to spoil the first movie. Anyway, it has sequels, and I actually haven't seen them yet. I will be watching them before the podcast just so I can give you guys context. But from what I've heard, it is similar to what I talked about with the 50 Shades of Grey sequels, just less BDSM. So
that's disappointing. Christmas BDSM is the best kind of BDSM. There's so many great things, wrapping paper and ribbons, and now just kidding. If you had to pick another Christmas franchise for this to be part of a multiverse, I want you to think between podcasts on how can we expand the IP. It's just a fun little exercise, so get back to us on that.
I mean, my answer is pretty obvious. It would be the Die Hard franchise.
Oh, really?
Sweet.
Wow, that would be a trip. All right. Well, once we watch this, we'll have to talk about that.
I'll explain my answer after.
Perfect. I love it.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, audience, once again for joining us for another film discussion. As I said, next week's episode will be our final one of the year. We'll probably go on a brief hiatus. I'm thinking like anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, depending on what happens behind the scenes with holiday plans and things like that. We will be back in 2023. Probably with, I'm hoping, at least like some expansion on some side quests, and some main quest as well. We're going to build those piles back up a little bit. But I can tell you our first episode will be a little bit of a celebration. So we'll talk about some statistics and things from our first year of doing the podcast. But until next time, we love you. Thanks for supporting the show, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.